Okay, so I have a table full of different fabrics. So for the Daisy bra, we'll be working with basically 3 different areas, I would say, where you potentially need 3 different types of fabric. So let's start with the back band because that's the easiest one. So the back band needs to have a stretch fabric and it needs to have a really good stretch retention. If you use for instance, a cotton jersey, even with elastane, because there's so much pressure in that area, like the back band of a bra really does create most of the support in a bra and therefore has a lot of pressure on it. You need a fabric that's going to be able to handle that. And a jersey, even with elastane, it's not going to be able to handle that. You could line the jersey with a power mesh or power net. So this is, as we've spoken about before, power mesh and power net. So this is more of a power mesh because it's a lightweight one, but actually it does have quite a good stretch retention. It's not like a fine flimsy one. It's quite strong. So something like this you could use by itself, or you could use it to line another fabric as well if you wanted the kind of continuity throughout the garment. So the back band is really important to get right. If you do use something that it doesn't work, it doesn't have that stretch retention, isn't really strong, then you're going to really notice that when you wear it. So that's, I would say, probably the most important part. So here is the power mesh, and I've got a few different versions as well. So this one is, as you can see, a lightweight but strong one, which is quite handy. This one here, it's actually a bit more kind of flimsy, it's not as stiff. And again, it's quite transparent. It's actually a little bit thicker than that other one, but it's not actually as strong. But again, this would be perfectly fine. So this is a kind of a light to medium weight power mesh. And then I only have remnants of this one, so I've used a lot of it. But this is a thicker power net, power mesh. And even though it's thicker, it's not necessarily stronger than the fine one here. But again, perfectly fine to use for the back band because it has that great stretch retention like all power nets and power meshes do. So the last one I've got to show you is a very strong power net. It's really strong. And this would be used for larger cup sizes. So if you have a larger bust, you will need extra support to be able to support the weight of the breasts. And like I said, because the underband or the back band particularly holds that pressure, it needs to be really strong. So this is a really strong power net. So if you have large bust, that would be what you would need. Okay, so let's go on to the cradle. So the cradle of the bra is this area here. So you've got the bridge, the centre front, and you've got the cradle, and that's the underarm kind of area. So the cradle always needs to be rigid. If the cradle isn't rigid, it's not going to hold the wires right. The wires will move around, and it just won't work. The wires won't work as they are supposed to work. It might feel twisted, the wires might be slipping everywhere. So for the cradle, you really do need a rigid fabric. So there are specific technical fabrics that we use to stabilize the cradle. So I'll show you what I have. So here is a bra stabilizer fabric, and it is completely rigid in both ways. However, it is very fine. So for this kind of fabric, you would definitely most likely have to get it from a lingerie specific supplier, because it's just not the type of fabric you would get from your average fabric shop. They probably wouldn't even know what it is, to be quite honest, because it is very specialized. So this fabric would be a liner. you wouldn't really want to use this fabric as the outer fabric because it's not particularly nice to the eye. So you would basically line another fabric that you wanted to use with this stabilizer. You could potentially use a stretch fabric and stabilize it with this, but that could be a little bit tricky, but it's completely doable. Or you would use another rigid fabric. So you've got a tulle here, you've got lace. Lace is obviously very common in bras, so that could be rigidized and used as the cradle. Here you've got another type of lace, an all over lace, that could be rigidized. Here we have a simplex fabric, which it's actually a knit fabric, and it just has a very low stretch on it, which is actually perfect for making bras, and I'll explain why in a minute. But you could rigidize this for the cradle as well. So there's lots of different fabrics you can use for the cradle, because you know that you can rigidize it with the bra stabilizer, so that's really great. The other one you can rigidize it with is bra tulle. So it's basically a rigid tulle fabric. As you can see, has that kind of honeycomb structure to it. It's not quite as rigid as the bra stabilizer, but it can still definitely be used, because this way, so along the grain, along the selvage, it doesn't stretch at all. It's completely rigid. And then along the width, it has a tiny give to it, but you can work with that. So the cradle, so the priority of the rigidness needs to be across the body. So potentially you could have a little bit of give or a little bit of stretch on the vertical, but the most rigid you can get it is best. But the priority is around the body. So you can use this to line other fabrics as well, or you could just use it by itself if that's what you wanted. Nice transparent fabric, but you would have to make sure that you cut it so that the completely rigid way, so along the grain, is going around the body. So that's another option, slightly nicer because it is just a slightly nicer look than the bra stabilizer fabric. So that's the cradle. So we've done the underband and we've done the cradle, and then we go on to the cups. So the cups need to be rigid because this is a rigid pattern. Generally, most bra patterns you would need rigid or low stretch fabrics. The reason why we don't use stretch fabrics on the cup is because it won't hold the breast how it should do, won't act as that support. But if you want that relaxed kind of look, then you can. It's not like a written rule, you know. A few wired bras with stretch fabrics or a kind of a low stretch in them, and I actually really like the kind of more relaxed fit. So it's not like a written rule, but obviously the pattern is made for a particular type of fabric, so you might have to adjust the pattern if that's what you wanted. And this one is made for a rigid or low stretch fabric for the cups. So the fabric that you can use for the cups, you could use this tulle here, and you would have the slight mechanical give going around the breasts, so they can kind of fill out the roundness more. You could even potentially use a jersey fabric and line it with a stabilizer fabric like the tulle or the stabilizer to make it rigid. Or you can use a rigid lace again, but because it's not a very stable rigid fabric, as in the middle part here has a lot of mechanical give, but then the end where there's more decoration doesn't have quite as mechanical give, then that would need to be rigidized as well, so you'd need a liner with that. So a tulle would be absolutely perfect to use with a rigid tulle and a rigid lace is a really good combination to use. And the stabilizer as well. So you really can use a lot of different fabrics for the cups. So here I've got the this is a viscose lawn. So yeah, you could make the cups out of this, and you can see that this fabric is rigid. Along the width there is just slightly more give. So when you cut out your pattern pieces, make sure that the give is going around the breast, that way. And the other one that is potentially really quite good to use is a low stretch knit fabric. So this is a simplex fabric and it is a tricot knit. You can also get a duoplex as well, which is polyester, and this is a nylon. And although it does have a bit of stretch, as you can see, because it's like a really tight stretch, it really does hold its form, and because it does have that tiny little bit of stretch, it can actually improve the fit of the cups as well, because it can allow the breast to kind of like stretch out a very, very tiny amount within the cups and make a more rounded look. So the simplex and the duoplex is a really good option for that, and I know it's not particularly pretty, especially not the garish white, but you can then put a rigid lace or a stretch lace on top of that. So that would almost be your liner, like that, and then you would have a bra that just has a tiny amount, tiny but very strong stretch to it, so that could fit the breast really well. So there's lots of different options when it comes to making bra cups. The only fabric I'd stay clear from is very stretchy fabrics for the cups and thicker fabrics that are made for outerwear. In my past I did a lot of experimentation with the different types of fabrics, and I have created bras with fabrics that you wouldn't usually expect. They're not your usual lingerie fabrics, but I did, and they are still wearable, but because of the thickness they are a bit clumpier under clothes, and it was definitely harder to work with, like harder to make. So yeah, that's something to bear in mind as well.